The streets of New Terra's Undercity never saw sunlight. Encased in towering structures of glass and steel, it was a labyrinth of shadows and neon where survival hinged on cunning, strength, or sheer luck. The stench of damp concrete and decaying refuse was omnipresent, mingling with a metallic tang of ozone from endless machinery. Here, amid the grime, lived the forgotten, the homeless, the outcasts, the remnants of humanity's sprawling empire. Among them was Alara, a wiry 9-year-old with tangled auburn hair and piercing gray eyes that seemed far too old for her small face. She clutched a patched satchel containing her most precious belongings, a rusted multi-tool, a threadbare blanket, and a hollow chip of her mother, flickering and glitching from overuse. Alara survived by scavenging scraps and outsmarting the predators that prowled these streets, both human and otherwise. Her mind, sharp as a shard of broken glass, had kept her alive where many had fallen. "Stay quiet. Stay small," her mother had once whispered in a memory she clung to like a lifeline. But Alara's silence ended that day, the day she screamed. It started with a low hum that vibrated through the cracked pavement. Alara paused, her ears straining. The hum grew louder, resonating with an unnatural frequency that made her teeth ache. She turned a corner and froze. Before her, towering like a nightmare made flesh, was a Zarkian, one of the Galactic Dominion's elite. Its elongated form shimmered with scales that refracted light into nauseating patterns. Tentacles writhed from its torso, each ending in a different grotesque appendage: claws, needles, sensors. The Zarkian crouched over a pile of refuse, probing it with surgical precision. Alara's heart hammered. Everyone in the Undercity knew the Zarkians consumed anything organic, whether it was food, plants, or people. But it wasn't the Zarkian that made her scream. It was the creature in its claw. A luminal rabbit, a bioluminescent species engineered as ecological stabilizers, squirmed in its grasp. Its glow flickered like a dying ember as the Zarkian raised it to its maw. The rabbit's wide, innocent eyes met Alara's. It wasn't just an animal to her. It was a fragment of beauty in a world that had forgotten kindness. Without thinking, Alara shrieked, her voice piercing the oppressive air. "Don't eat that." The Zarkian halted. Its head swiveled toward her, its faceted eyes reflecting 1,000 distorted versions of her face. The Undercity's usual noise, hissing steam, distant shouts, the whir of drones, fell away, leaving only the sound of her ragged breathing. The rabbit dangled limply in its claw. "Explain," it said, its voice a guttural symphony of tones that seemed to bypass her ears and resonate in her bones. Terror rooted Alara to the spot. She wanted to run, to disappear into the shadows, but something in her, something defiant and desperate, forced her to stand her ground. It's not food," she stammered. "It's alive. It's important." The Zarkian tilted its head, its tentacles undulating. "All organic matter is sustenance. Clarify your statement." Alara's mind raced. How could she explain something so intrinsic, so human, to an alien that saw life only as fuel? "It's beautiful," she said finally. "It's one of the last things left that glows in the dark." For a moment, there was silence. Then, with a motion almost too quick to follow, the Zarkian lowered the rabbit to the ground. It scrambled away, its light flaring brightly as it disappeared into the shadows. The alien's eyes remained fixed on Alara. "You are incorrect," it said. "But curious." Before Alara could respond, a low rumble shook the ground. The hum she'd heard earlier intensified, becoming a deafening roar as a massive ship descended from the murky sky. Its sleek, obsidian surface was etched with glowing symbols of the Galactic Dominion. The Zarkian straightened, its tentacles retracting. A hatch opened, and from the ship emerged a figure unlike any Ilera had ever seen. Tall and clad in flowing robes of iridescent fabric, the Galactic Emperor was a being of paradoxes, both imposing and graceful, alien yet eerily familiar. A golden circlet floated above their head, pulsating with energy. Their eyes, pools of shifting starlight, locked onto Ilera with an intensity that made her feel as though her very soul was being dissected. "Who dares disrupt the sustenance protocols?" the Emperor intoned, their voice a harmonious blend of languages that echoed with authority. The Zarkian gestured toward Ilera. "This human child. She claims organic matter possesses value beyond consumption." The Emperor's gaze shifted to Ilera, pinning her in place. She wanted to shrink, to vanish, but something in their gaze, an unspoken challenge, compelled her to stand tall. "Explain yourself, child," the Emperor commanded. And so, with a trembling voice but unyielding resolve, Ilera began to speak. The air between Ilera and the Galactic Emperor hung thick with tension, as though the weight of countless stars had been compressed into this singular moment. The Emperor's robe shimmered faintly, reflecting the dim light of the Undercity's neon haze. Their expression, if it could be called that, remained inscrutable, their celestial eyes fixed unblinkingly on the trembling child before them. A murmur of noise broke the stillness. A small crowd had gathered, a mixture of curiosity and fear etched across their worn faces. They kept a cautious distance, as if proximity to this alien spectacle might draw the Emperor's gaze toward them. Whispers rippled through the throng, words tumbling in a language Ilera barely registered. A human child, foolish, brave. The Emperor raised a hand, and silence fell instantly, as though the air itself had been drained of sound. They took a deliberate step forward, each motion fluid and unhurried, exuding an otherworldly poise. A faint hum emanated from their floating circlet, resonating in Ilera's chest like the toll of a distant bell. "Child," they began, their voice carrying a weight that seemed to reshape the space around them. "You speak of value beyond sustenance, yet your kind's actions seldom reflect such beliefs. Shall I recount the worlds razed by human greed, the ecosystems reduced to dust in pursuit of fleeting progress?" Ilera swallowed hard. Her mind raced, trying to form coherent thoughts under the pressure of the Emperor's presence. She knew the stories, everyone did. Humanity's expansion into the stars had left scars across galaxies, wounds that had yet to heal. And yet, standing here, she felt something stir within her. Defiance, perhaps, or hope. We've made mistakes," she said, her voice quivering but steady enough to carry. "But that doesn't mean we can't change. Doesn't mean we can't see beauty and protect it." The Emperor's eyes narrowed, the shifting starlight within them dimming slightly. "Words are but echoes in the void, child. Convince me your kind deserves such a chance." Ilera hesitated, her fingers tightening around the strap of her satchel. Her gaze darted to the gathered crowd, their faces a tapestry of despair and cautious hope. For a brief moment, she felt impossibly small, a fragile ember against the vast darkness of the cosmos. And yet, embers could ignite wildfires. "Give us a test," she said suddenly, surprising even herself. The words tumbled out in a rush, fueled by a desperation she couldn't suppress. "A chance to prove we can, that we care about more than ourselves." The Emperor tilted their head, the gesture almost imperceptible. Their gaze swept across the crowd, then back to Ilera. "A test," they echoed, their voice tinged with an emotion Ilera couldn't place. Curiosity, perhaps, or amusement. Yes, Ilera insisted, her resolve hardening. Something that shows we're more than just destroyers. Let us prove it. The silence that followed was excruciating. Ilera could feel her heartbeat in her ears, her palms slick with sweat. She didn't dare look away from the Emperor, though the weight of their gaze pressed down on her like a storm. Then, at last, the Emperor spoke. "Very well," they said, their tone as measured as the movement of celestial bodies. "A test you shall have." The crowd stirred uneasily, but no one dared to speak. The Emperor extended a hand, their elongated fingers unfurling like the petals of an alien flower. From the air itself, a crystalline sphere coalesced, shimmering with an inner light that pulsed faintly, in time with Ilera's heartbeat. "This is a seed," the Emperor said, their voice resonant with meaning. "A fragment of a dying world, entrusted to my care. If your kind can nurture it, protect it, and help it flourish, then perhaps there is hope for you yet." They extended the sphere toward Ilera. It floated just above their palm, its radiance casting delicate patterns of light across her dirt-smudged face. She hesitated, her hand hovering uncertainly. Taking it felt like an act of irretrievable consequence, a binding promise she wasn't sure she could keep. But as she looked into the Emperor's gaze, she saw something unexpected, the faintest glimmer of possibility. With trembling fingers, she reached out and grasped the sphere. It was warm against her skin, its surface smooth, yet strangely alive. A faint hum vibrated through her fingertips, resonating with something deep inside her. "You have one cycle of your world star," the Emperor said, stepping back. "Succeed, and we shall see. Fail, and your kind's fate is sealed." Ilera nodded, her grip tightening on the sphere. She had no idea how she would accomplish what the Emperor demanded, but she knew one thing with certainty. She couldn't do it alone. As the Emperor turned and ascended back to their ship, the crowd began to close in, their faces alight with questions, fear, and cautious hope. The test had begun. Ilera stood motionless, the sphere cradled in her hands, as the crowd encircled her. Their eyes bore into her, expectant yet wary. The Undercity was a place where hope was as scarce as clean air, and this moment teetered on the edge of disbelief and desperation. She could feel the warmth of the sphere, its faint pulses aligning with her own heartbeat, but its purpose, and how to fulfill the Emperor's demand, remained a mystery. "What is it?" a grizzled man finally asked, his voice rough from years of inhaling the Undercity's polluted air. His hollow cheeks and sunken eyes mirrored the hardships that had etched themselves into every corner of his being. "It's the seed," Ilera replied, her voice small but firm. "We're supposed to make it grow." A murmur rippled through the crowd, confusion and skepticism mingling with faint threads of curiosity. Another voice, this one sharper and accusatory, cut through the noise. "Grow. In this wasteland, what does that even mean? And why is it up to you?" Ilera turned to see a woman step forward, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She had the wiry build of someone who had fought for every scrap of survival, her gaze piercing and unyielding. "What makes you so special, kid? Why didn't they ask one of us?" Ilera's cheeks burned, but she refused to shrink under the woman's glare. "I don't know why," she admitted, her grip tightening on the sphere. "But they did. And now it's up to all of us. I can't do this alone." The woman's eyes narrowed, but before she could retort, a voice rang out from the back of the crowd. "Maybe we should listen." The speaker was a young man, no older than 20, with a mop of unruly hair and an easy smile that seemed out of place in the Undercity. He stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. I mean, what do we have to lose? It's not like things can get much worse down here. A few chuckles broke the tension, and the woman's rigid posture softened slightly. Ilera seized the moment. We have one cycle, she said, her voice gaining strength. That's all the time we have to figure this out. If we fail, it's over. For all of us. What's the plan then? The young man asked, his smile fading into a more serious expression. Ilera hesitated. She had no plan, no idea where to begin. But the weight of the sphere in her hands and the eyes of the crowd spurred her forward. First, we find a place safe enough to protect this, she said. And then we figure out how to make it grow. The woman sighed, shaking her head. You're gonna need more than hope, kid. But fine, I'll help. Name's Mara. Dax, the young man added with a nod. And yeah, I'm in too. One by one, others began to step forward, reluctant at first, then, with growing determination. They were scavengers, laborers, outcasts, people who had nothing left to lose. Together, they formed an unlikely coalition, bound by the fragile thread of hope Ilera had sparked. The first challenge was finding a place to shelter the sphere. The Undercity's labyrinthine expanse offered countless hiding spots, but few were secure. The air was thick with the buzz of surveillance drones and the distant clatter of Dominion enforcers. Every step felt like a gamble, each shadow a potential threat. There's an old maintenance shaft near the thermal vents, Mara suggested as they huddled in a crumbling alcove. Abandoned for years, but it's warm and out of the way. Might be our best bet. Ilera nodded. Let's check out. The journey was harrowing. The group moved in near silence, their footsteps muffled against the damp, uneven ground. Ilera felt the weight of the sphere grow heavier with each passing moment, as though it could sense the danger surrounding them. Dax kept close to her, his easygoing demeanor replaced by a quiet vigilance. Mara led the way, her sharp eyes scanning every corner for signs of movement. When they finally reached the maintenance shaft, it was exactly as Mara had described, narrow, damp, and reeking of decay, but hidden from prying eyes. Ilera stepped inside, her breath catching as the sphere's glow intensified. The pulsing light danced across the corroded walls, casting intricate patterns that seemed almost alive. It likes this place, Dax remarked, his voice tinged with wonder. Ilera knelt, placing the sphere gently on the ground. Its warmth radiated outward, dispelling some of the chill that permeated the air. For the first time since the Emperor's challenge, she felt a flicker of hope. But as the group settled in, the enormity of their task loomed over them. They had found a shelter, yes, but how were they supposed to make the seed grow in a world so barren, so devoid of life? The question hung unspoken among them, a shadow that refused to dissipate. Ilera sat cross-legged before the sphere, her gray eyes reflecting its glow. We'll figure out, she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. And though doubt gnawed at the edges of her resolve, the faint hum of the sphere seemed to whisper back, its warmth steady and unwavering. Ilera woke to the faint glow of the sphere, its gentle pulses now steady and rhythmic. Around her, the makeshift shelter was quiet save for the occasional murmur of someone shifting in their sleep. The air was damp and cold, but the warmth radiating from the sphere was enough to keep her hands from trembling. It was the only source of comfort in an otherwise bleak world. The rest of the group stirred slowly. Mara was the first to rise, her sharp eyes scanning their surroundings before muttering something under her breath. Dax followed, his usual grin absent, replaced by a look of thoughtful concern. They had survived the night, but survival wasn't enough. The challenge loomed over them, as heavy and oppressive as the smog-laden sky above. Ilara sat cross-legged in front of the sphere, her fingers tracing its smooth surface. "We need to figure out what it needs," she said, breaking the silence. Mara snorted. "If it's anything like a plant, we're screwed. Nothing grows down here." Dax leaned against a wall, his arms crossed. "Maybe it's not about what it needs. Maybe it's about what we're willing to give." Ilara tilted her head, considering his words. The sphere seemed to hum faintly in response, as if acknowledging the sentiment. She frowned, her mind racing through every fragment of knowledge she had gleaned from the scraps of books and stories she'd scavenged over the years. Plants needed sunlight, water, and nutrients, but this wasn't a plant. It was something far more alien, far more enigmatic. "Water," she murmured. "It has to need water, right? Everything does." Mara raised an eyebrow. "And where exactly do you plan to find clean water down here? We barely have enough for ourselves." Ilara hesitated, her gaze dropping to the sphere. Its glow flickered faintly, as if urging her onward. "There's a filtration plant in Sector 12, she said finally. "It's dangerous, but it might have what we need." Mara's expression darkened. "Sector 12? Are you out of your mind? That place is crawling with Dominion patrols. We'd be dead before we even got close. Do you have a better idea?" Ilara shot back, her voice sharper than she intended. The weight of the Emperor's challenge pressed against her chest, and the fear of failure was a constant gnawing presence. "If we don't try, this thing dies. And if it dies, so do we. All of us." The tension hung heavy in the air. Dax broke it with a quiet laugh. "Well, when you put it that way, how can we say no?" He pushed off the wall and clapped his hands together. "Let's do it. Mara, you coming?" Mara muttered a curse under her breath, but nodded. "Fine. But if we get caught, I'm blaming you." The journey to Sector 12 was harrowing. The group moved in silence, their footsteps muffled against the damp, uneven ground. The labyrinthine undercity was a maze of shadows and dangers, each turn a potential ambush. Ilara clutched the sphere tightly, its warmth a small comfort against the chill of fear that gripped her. When they finally reached the filtration plant, it was worse than they had imagined. Dominion patrols moved in tight formations, their armor gleaming under harsh floodlights. The plant itself was a monolithic structure, its towering pipes belching steam into the stale air. "Now what?" Mara whispered, her voice barely audible. Ilara scanned the area, her mind racing. There had to be a way in, a weakness, something they could exploit. Her eyes caught on a rusted maintenance hatch, partially obscured by a pile of debris. "There," she said, pointing. "That's our way in." Dax grinned. "I love a good crawl through the muck. Let's go." The group moved quickly and quietly, slipping through the shadows until they reached the hatch. It took all of Mara's strength to wrench it open, the metal groaning in protest. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of oil and decay, but it was safe for now. They navigated the plant's maze-like interior with cautious determination. Pipes hissed and groaned around them, and the distant hum of machinery was a constant backdrop. When they finally found the water reservoir, Ilara felt a surge of relief. The water was murky, but clear enough to reflect the faint glow of the sphere as she held it close. "Now what?" Mara asked, her voice tight with tension. Ilara knelt by the reservoir, lowering the sphere until it hovered just above the surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the sphere began to glow brighter, its pulses quickening. A tendril of light extended from its surface, dipping into the water like a delicate root. The water shimmered, tiny ripples spreading outward. It's working, Dax breathed, his voice filled with awe. The glow intensified, and the sphere began to vibrate gently. Ilera watched in wonder as a tiny sprout emerged from its surface, a fragile green shoot that seemed impossibly vibrant against the drab surroundings. It was the first sign of life she had seen in the Undercity, and it filled her chest with a fierce, unyielding hope. But their triumph was short-lived. The sound of boots on metal echoed through the corridor, sharp and relentless. Mara's eyes widened. Dominion patrol. We've got to move. Ilera cradled the sphere, careful not to disturb the sprout. Go. I'll follow. Dax hesitated, his gaze flicking between her and the approaching threat. We're not leaving you. Go, she insisted, her voice firm. I'll catch up. With a reluctant nod, Dax and Mara disappeared into the shadows. Ilera took a deep breath, clutching the sphere tightly as she prepared to run. The sprout trembled, but its light remained steady, a beacon of resilience in the darkness. The Undercity corridors seemed to close in as Ilera ran, her breaths coming in sharp, desperate bursts. The sphere in her arms felt heavier with every step, the fragile sprout trembling but unbroken. Behind her, the sound of Dominion boots echoed, growing louder with each passing second. She didn't dare look back. A sudden turn brought her to a narrow passageway littered with debris. Ilera skidded to a halt, her heart hammering in her chest. The path was barely wide enough for her to squeeze through, but it was her only option. Taking a deep breath, she pressed forward, the jagged edges of the walls scraping against her shoulders. The sound of pursuit faded slightly as she emerged into a dimly lit chamber. The air was damp and stale, carrying the faint hum of machinery. Ilera's eyes darted around, searching for an escape route. To her left, a rusted ladder led upward into the darkness. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. She began to climb, her muscles burning with the effort. The sphere glowed faintly, its light casting eerie shadows on the walls. The sprout swayed gently with each movement, a reminder of what was at stake. Above her, the ladder ended abruptly at a hatch. Ilera pushed against it with all her strength, the metal groaning in protest before finally giving way. She emerged into a vast, open expanse. The ceiling arched high above, crisscrossed with beams and pipes. The floor was scattered with remnants of machinery and tools long abandoned. It was a forgotten place, untouched by the Dominion's relentless control, a sanctuary. For now, Ilera set the sphere down carefully, her hands trembling. The sprout seemed to stretch toward the faint light filtering through cracks in the ceiling, its green hue vibrant against the dull gray surroundings. She knelt beside it, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. A sound behind her made her whip around. Mara and Dax emerged from the shadows, their faces flushed with exertion. Lost them, Mara said, her voice low and breathless. For now, Ilera felt a wave of relief wash over her. The sprout, it's growing, she said, gesturing to the sphere. Dax crouched beside it, his expression softening. It's incredible. I didn't think anything could grow down here. Neither did I, Ilera admitted. She reached out, her fingers brushing the delicate leaves. The sprout quivered slightly, but remained firm. But it's not enough. We need more water. And light. Mara frowned. Light's going to be a problem. The upper levels are crawling with Dominion patrols. Then we'll find another way, Ilera said, determination hardening her voice. There has to be something we can use. Mirrors, maybe, to reflect light down here. Dax nodded. I've seen old solar panels in some of the abandoned sectors. They're probably useless, but we might be able to salvage something. Good, Ilara said. We'll split up. Mara, you and Dax search for panels. I'll stay here and protect the sphere. Mara hesitated, her gaze flicking between Ilara and the sprout. Are you sure? It's not safe to be alone. I'll be fine, Ilara said, though her voice wavered slightly. This is more important. Mara sighed, but didn't argue. Fine. But if anything happens, signal us. We'll come back. Ilara watched as they disappeared into the shadows, their footsteps fading into the distance. The chamber felt impossibly quiet in their absence, the only sound the faint hum of the sphere. She sat cross-legged beside it, her fingers tracing the patterns on its surface. The minutes stretched into hours. Ilara's mind raced with questions and doubts. What if they couldn't find the panels? What if the Dominion found them first? The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her, threatening to crush her resolve. She glanced at the sprout, its tiny leaves trembling in the stale air. It was fragile, yes, but it was alive, and as long as it lived, so did hope. A sudden noise shattered the silence. Ilara scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding. The glow of the sphere intensified, casting long shadows across the chamber. From the darkness, a figure emerged, tall, cloaked, and unmistakably alien. Its form was sleek and angular, its skin a shimmering shade of silver that seemed to ripple like liquid metal. Ilara froze, her instincts screaming at her to run. But the figure made no move to attack. Instead, it raised a hand, palm outstretched, in a gesture that seemed almost peaceful. The alien spoke, its voice resonating like a melody. You protect the seed. Ilara blinked, her mind struggling to process the words. You know what this is? She managed to ask. The alien nodded slowly. It is life, a rare and precious gift. You must nurture it. I'm trying, Ilara said, her voice trembling. But it's not enough. I don't know what it needs. The alien stepped closer, its movements fluid and deliberate. It knelt beside the sphere, its silver fingers brushing the sprout with a gentleness that surprised her. The seed requires more than water and light. It requires unity, trust, sacrifice. Ilara frowned. What does that mean? The alien's gaze met hers, its eyes glowing faintly. You will understand. In time. It rose to its feet, its form seeming to shimmer and blur. Protect the seed, child. It is the key to your survival. And there's... Before Ilara could respond, the alien turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving her alone with the sphere and the weight of its cryptic message. She knelt beside the sprout once more, her mind swirling with questions. Unity, trust, sacrifice. The words echoed in her thoughts, as enigmatic as the alien who had spoken them. As she sat in the quiet, the sprout seemed to glow a little brighter, its tiny leaves reaching upward with newfound strength. Ilara took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. Whatever it took, she would protect the seed. She would make it grow. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of certainty. They still had a chance. The Undercity quaked with the sound of the Dominion's approach. Ilara stood in the center of the chamber, the sphere clutched tightly in her hands. The sprout had grown taller overnight, its delicate leaves now shimmering faintly with a light that felt alive. Mara and Dax had not yet returned, and the alien's cryptic words replayed in her mind like a drumbeat. Unity, trust, sacrifice. She didn't know what it meant, but there was no time left to wonder. The Dominion patrol was close. The metallic clang of their boots echoed down the passageways, a relentless harbinger of destruction. Ilara's heart pounded as she stared at the sprout, willing it to grow, to become something strong enough to survive. But it remained as fragile as ever. The first Dominion soldier appeared in the doorway, his armor gleaming in the sphere's light. He raised his weapon, his visor reflecting Illyra's defiant stare. Before he could fire, a blur of motion erupted from the shadows. Dax crashed into the soldier with a feral yell, his makeshift blade flashing in the dim light. The soldier fell, and Dax turned, his face streaked with sweat and grime. "Mara's holding them off," he said, breathless. "But they've got reinforcements. We can't hold them for long." Illyra nodded, her mind racing. She glanced at the sphere, its glow intensifying as if responding to her thoughts. "It needs more," she whispered. "I don't know how, but it needs more." Dax frowned, his gaze flicking to the sprout. "What are you talking about?" "Unity, trust, sacrifice," Illyra said, her voice trembling. "That's what the alien said. It's the only way." Before Dax could respond, Mara burst into the chamber, blood dripping from a gash on her forehead. "They're coming. We've got maybe 30 seconds. Illyra's chest tightened. She looked at her friends, at the sprout, at the glowing sphere that seemed to pulse with desperation. And then she knew. "It needs us," she said, her voice steady now. "All of us." "What does that even mean?" Mara snapped, her voice laced with frustration. "We don't have time for riddles." Illyra stepped forward, the sphere cradled in her arms. "It's not just a seed. It's alive. It's connected to us. If we don't give it everything we have, our trust, our strength, our will, it won't survive. And neither will we." Mara stared at her, her eyes wide. "You're serious?" "I am," Illyra said, her voice unshakable. "Please, trust me." Dax hesitated only a moment before nodding. "What do we do?" Illyra knelt, placing the sphere gently on the ground. "Put your hands on it. Focus. Think about why we're doing this, what we're fighting for." Mara muttered a curse, but knelt beside her, placing her hands on the sphere. Dax followed, his jaw clenched with determination. The moment their hands touched the sphere, its glow intensified, bathing the chamber in radiant light. The sprout quivered, its leaves unfurling with a sound like a sigh. The Dominion soldiers burst into the chamber, their weapons raised. But before they could fire, the sphere erupted in a blinding burst of light. Illyra felt a surge of energy rush through her, a warmth that filled every corner of her being. The sprout grew rapidly, its stem thickening, its leaves spreading wide. Roots shot out from the sphere, anchoring it to the ground as it transformed into a towering tree, its branches glowing with a soft, golden light. The soldiers froze, their weapons faltering as the light washed over them. The air seemed to hum with a deep, resonant harmony, a sound that resonated in Illyra's chest. She looked at her friends, their faces lit with awe. The tree was more than just a plant. It was life itself, pure and unyielding. The alien's voice echoed in her mind, clear and calm. "Unity brings strength. Trust brings hope. Sacrifice brings life." Illyra understood now. The sphere had been a test, not just of their ability to nurture it, but of their ability to come together, to put aside fear and doubt for something greater. She rose to her feet, her gaze steady as she faced the Dominion soldiers. "You don't have to do this," she said, her voice carrying over the hum of the tree. "Look at it. This is what we've been missing. This is what we've been fighting for." The lead soldier hesitated, his weapon lowering slightly. The light from the tree reflected in his visor, and for a moment, Illyra thought she saw something shift in his stance. Doubt, humanity, One by one, the soldiers lowered their weapons. The tree's light seemed to envelop them, its warmth breaking through the cold, mechanical precision that had defined their existence. Ilara felt tears sting her eyes as she realized the truth. The seed had not only brought life to the Undercity, but to the people themselves. Mara and Dax stood beside her, their faces lit with relief and wonder. "You did it," Mara said, her voice soft. "No," Ilara said, her gaze fixed on the tree. "We did it." The Undercity was forever changed. The tree's light spread through the labyrinthine corridors, its roots breaking through the decay to bring new life. People emerged from the shadows, their faces filled with awe and hope as they gathered around the glowing tree. It became a symbol of unity, a reminder of what could be achieved when they stood together. Ilara, Mara, and Dax remained at its base, their bond stronger than ever. The alien never returned, but its words stayed with Ilara, a constant reminder of the journey they had taken. As she looked up at the tree, its branches reaching toward the cracks of light above, Ilara felt a quiet certainty. The fight was not over, but they had found something worth fighting for. And that, she knew, was enough.